So good morning, everybody, and welcome. It's Sunday morning here in London. The clock's just changed, so we've had a bit of kerfuffle getting ourselves here on time. But welcome to another week of Turning Towards Life with the two of us, Lizzie and Justin from Thirdspace. It's a beautiful, I guess it is where you are, Lizzie, too, because we're not so far apart from one another. Beautiful spring morning again this morning. The sun is streaming in through our windows, and I think a full third of the human world, we are sometime into the needing to keep ourselves sheltered in place. I really love that language, which some friends in the US are using to help to protect ourselves, but more importantly, to help to protect other people from the coronavirus pandemic, which is still unfolding. Of course, I don't need to say this to any of you who are with us now, because you'll be right in the thick of it, but I suppose I'm saying it partly just to name how things are, Lizzie, and partly because sometimes people might come back and be with us in some months or some years' time. But as always, I'm so pleased to be here. And Lizzie, you've brought us this amazing and beautiful source for us to read that you've written. So I'm going to say no more and hand over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. If you're here now, maybe you're on a podcast, maybe you're walking the dog, keeping your 2 meters distance from people, whatever you're doing. We're really grateful to be here. And this little poem about what I've called the new normal kind of tumbled out the other day on a very quiet, peaceful day. And I feel like I'm in a continuous, maybe like a roller coaster of feeling and reactivity to what's happening. And this was an encouragement to myself, really, to allow a kind of surrender to be here in amongst this really strange, huge time in our world. So it's called The New Normal. So this source, which is a poem that I wrote the other day, came from a very peaceful day, and I wrote it as an encouragement to myself when little Vesper had gone to sleep, and I was sitting on the sofa wondering about the day that had gone and reflecting. And so I'm going to read, and then we can have a chat about it as normal. So this is called The New Normal. The warm sun on my face, the cool breeze on my ankles, my babe asleep on my chest, her breath so gentle, like the smallest of waves on the shore. Thank you for surrendering to this, he says. Thank you for being willing to let this be enough. For now, we can suffer this, or we can let it become our normal. So we bake a cake, and I clean the door handles, and we have a cup of tea and cook dinner. We watch the baby girl sleeping and say thank you.
So I'm going to read it too. I realised whilst you were reading, Lizzie, that given the state of the world, and who knows what's happening in people's lives, certainly this week, we have already, in my family, come very close into the trauma of the circumstances that we're in the middle of. So I wonder how everyone is as they're listening to this. And so maybe one of the things that you could do before I read is just take a moment to settle. So something can really happen when we... So good morning, everybody. I think we may be live. The technology is really messing with us this morning. Something can really happen when we let ourselves settle and return to ourselves. So particularly if you, as I have felt many, many times in the past days, charged up, triggered, anxious, wary, fearful, frustrated, then just a moment to feel your own feet if you can, and to let yourself feel the way that you're supported right now by where you're standing or sitting or lying or walking, whatever else is going on in the world, just take a moment to let yourself feel that you are indeed supported by the ground, the chair, the bed, the sofa. And let yourself feel the solidity of your own body. You're right here as I read Lizzie's words. The new normal. The warm sun on my face, the cool breeze on my ankles, my babe asleep on my chest, her breath so gentle, like the smallest of waves on the shore. Thank you for surrendering to this, he says. Thank you for being willing to let this be enough for now. We can suffer this, or we can let it become our normal. So we bake a cake, and I clean the door handles, and we have a cup of tea and cook dinner. We watch the baby girl sleeping and say thank you.
So as you're reading that, Justin, I'm realizing that the energy of this poem has the kind of spaciousness that is being afforded to us at the moment. And I feel like I'm in a process where I have to recalibrate every time something hits me. And so for me as well, this poem speaks of a kind of surrendering to the process of whatever this is doing to us, to the world, to us individually, to our communities, whatever. And it feels like there are these kind of shock points. And as you say, all the worry, all of the despair, the grief, the fear is kind of hits, and then I have a choice as to how I recalibrate to it being in my life and getting used to it being here. And this call for surrender, like I've never spent this much time in my house before. I've never spent this much time probably with my husband before. Obviously I'm spending all the time with Vesper, so that pace is a kind of continuum for me. But it's a huge process for everyone. It's just huge, whether we're having arguments with the people around us because someone's driving us nuts by the way they bite their nails or they chew their popcorn or whatever they're doing, or the way they load the dishwasher. We're all in close quarters with each other. We also might be having an experience of seeing each other for the first time because we really haven't spent that much time together before, and all kinds of domestic shenanigans must be going on with people trying to have their children in a house 24 hours a day who are older than my little one. And I know from the comedy and the creative videos that are being made that there's so many different things going on. And this kind of, I think we're in a situation basically where what I can see is that all of the ways that we compensate for things are being stripped of us. So all the ways that we use things to distract ourselves, to create separation, to compensate for the things that are going on inside, they're being removed from us, and we are being kind of laid bare by this process. And so this encouragement to me, to us, to allow and surrender and to keep that coming as well feels like the essence of, and the intention really of this willingness to let this be enough. And in a culture of more that we're in, where everything feels like we need to do more of things, this is very confronting. And so my repeated wish to surrender and allow and surrender and allow also brings up everything that's the opposite of that as well. And so I guess this is in support of all of us and all of our like we've all got a choice of how to respond. sometimes it's so difficult because we're in such reaction. I mean, feel like I wake up and have forgotten when I wake up what's going on, and then suddenly it kind of drops back in again, and I'm, the new normal has to occur to me. So it's like, oh, here I am, there's nothing, there's no appointments, I mean, this was today, this is like the only thing in the diary forever, it's just heading towards life. But for me, that's it really, and the rest of it is I don't really know what day of the week it is anymore. It's just a kind of a continuum. And so I write this in support of all of us who are having to surrender and having to give up a lot of all the things we do and all the things we're hanging on to stay sane. And we are in a massively confronting situation right now.
I'm so grateful for your words, Lizzie, and for what you're saying about them. And like all of our, like so many of the sources that we choose, what you've written has so much packed into every line. The part that's really coming to me as you've been talking is the line, "Thank you for surrendering to this," he says. It's striking me that there's the part of this that we do for ourselves, and then there's the part of this that we do for one another. And the part that we have to do for ourselves is exactly as you're saying. The world is right now as it is, and as whatever we can do to be with the world as it is, and to not be in our endless demand that things be different to how they are when they can't be. Those things that can't be different, it seems to me that our demands that they be different, which cause us irritation or despair, or in me fear, for our own sake, it really helps not to pile suffering onto suffering. But I hadn't spotted this part until you were speaking, which is it's also an act of care for one another to surrender.
Mm.
And I can see this just here, all five of us, like so many families, we're all here in the house together for much longer than we ordinarily would be. And I can see that those places and around those things that I'm unwilling to surrender, I inadvertently bring suffering to other people. By getting triggered when it's unnecessary, by withdrawing when I don't need to, by getting frustrated about things that they can't change and I can't change. So it seems to me it's a great act of care to, even though some of what we're surrendering to is sort of the humdrum mundanity of things that many times we try to get away from. I might be bored, I might have to be with you longer than I want to, I might not know what to do, I might not have anything in my diary, it might be unfamiliar. There's all of that, but there's also the more traumatic background of this as well. So I'm sure that many people listening to this, by the time you listen to this, will be in a very similar position than I'm about to say, or maybe even a much closer in position. But for me, having heard this week that someone I love very much lost his brother to this virus this week, and knowing that we're just at the beginning of that happening again and again and again and again, as it already has been happening in many parts of the world. I'm just talking about what the situation we're in here in London. It's seeming to me that our capacity to surrender to both the immediate domestic circumstance where we can, for any of us who are safe with our families, for any of us who aren't put at risk because of the people that we're with, this great big act of surrendering to ordinariness, I think, is that it feels to me like a giant call and a giant act of care that we must do everything we can to take up. And one of the reasons we must do it is because if we don't do it there, we're going to have very, very little chance of surrendering to the bigger difficulties that we're all in the middle of, that we also can't change. And it feels to me, as I'm saying this to you, Lizzie, that when we can surrender where is appropriate, we give ourselves also much better capacity to respond. In a way, it's our sort of holding on to the things. It's our not doing what you've written about so beautifully that puts us and the people we're with already in a situation of difficulty beyond that which is called for, when there are lots of things that are difficult and are going to be difficult anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So how beautiful and necessary to have a cup of tea and cook dinner and clean the door handles and bake a cake and watch our children if we have them and say thank you.
Mm. And as you're speaking, it's, coming to me that when we are in amongst our grief and the trauma of things happening that are painful, this is also the kind of thing that we do. Like, I remember in the last years when people in my close setup have died, we've had a cup of tea and we've cooked dinner, and I might not have cleaned the door handles, but we might have baked a cake. And we say thank you for the things that are here. There's a kind of somehow an interconnectedness between the mundanity and the preciousness, that in this surrender to the mundane, to the ordinary, there's a cultivation of something that's necessary for when trauma strikes or things are really, really, really hard. The we will still be there, we will still be here, and we will have to respond. And it sounds like, Justin, you're in that response not only in a kind of domestic, together with your family way, but really sad loss, like huge, devastating loss of people who are young and your friends and family, and there's nothing that can be done about it, and it's reminding me of our conversations about grief and the kind of allowing that's necessary in order to feel, and to kind of create this spaciousness and this surrender, and to give space to those feelings, and to know the distinction between our reactivity and our tension, and to take that as an opportunity to surrender into, to make gentle, so that the feelings can be felt, feels really important. And I know that this is such a tumultuous time. My imagination catastrophizes all the time. My husband talks about all of the stats all the time. I find it really, really difficult to listen to the stats the whole time, but I have a person in my house who, that's how they're engaging with it, and I am learning to be with that, but I find it really triggering and really hard to be consistently faced with the statistics. And I feel like this kind of coming home and practicing coming back again to surrendering and surrendering and surrendering is kind of all I have. And I have these huge waves of fear, huge waves of worry about my family. My brother's an intubation expert, an anaesthetist working with mums and babies with COVID in Canada. So, he sends us pictures with his mask on and his whole virus kit on, and said that it's a particularly infectious process, or a contagious process to intubate people, basically, because that's where all of the virus lives. I have these kind of waves of worry and concern, also for my parents, all the people, everyone. And I feel like it's like being thrown around a lot. And I keep having to remember that I want to let myself be thrown around, but I also want to remember that I have a choice. Like, I have a way that I can cultivate a response to this, rather than stay in my kind of habitual, fearful, frightened, terrified, small place. And maybe writing poems and coming back to being aware of the small things, which Vesper is a gift for, because I can't not be, I can't not smile when she smiles at me. So weirdly, in this time, I'm smiling more than I've ever smiled before, when it's at a time when I probably, if she wasn't here, wouldn't be smiling very much at all. So I'm very aware of the gift that she is, and the gift that she brings me of showing me life itself, rather than all of the stuff that's going on. And she magnifies goodness rather than magnifying the horror. And I so appreciate that. And it's every day I think, my goodness, thank goodness she's here. And I think for everybody who's a parent as well, depending on how old your children are, they either know nothing about this, or a little bit about it, or all of it. But when they're smaller, there's a way, just like in ordinary life, that they don't know what your work problems are, or your marriage issues, or whatever. They're beaming their selves into the world, and it's a very opposite energy than the one that I'm receiving from outside through the news. And so I just feel grateful that I have her as a reminder, but I also have a consciousness that I can call on, that is aware of an opportunity that I can always call on to allow and to let this be what it is, and bring myself to it with a surrender. And whether that allows the grief to come, whether that allows the joy to come, whatever, surrendering and letting go of control feels like, I think maybe we've said this metaphor before, but if you kind of fight a wave when you're surfing, you tend to get beaten up. But if you let it take you, it's actually better than you knew. It's a bit scary, but it lets you breathe, for one, because you can't breathe if you're trying to attack a wave. But if you're kind of on the wave, you at least have oxygen, and the energy is behind you and taking you through, rather than smashing you to smithereens. And I think that's the choice I'm just trying to make all the time, so that, like we were talking about next week, I can emerge from this being in a washing machine for these probably months in a different way than if I just let it have me and started and just fought it every day and railed against it. And that's what my practice is. And also turning towards life is that too, because I have to come to this and feel what my process is. Like, it has to be conscious. I have to be conscious. And that's why this is such a gift too, is that this practice and others as well are mirrors to me, so that I can see what I'm actually doing. And I'm really grateful for that as well.
What you say is such a potent reminder of the power of good practice to interrupt and to remind us of another way that we could be. And I was so taken by a phrase you said just a minute or two ago, which was to make gentle. It struck me that in this wider situation, which has so much energy in it, the energy of grief and the energy of rage and the energy of fear and the energy of confusion and the energy of all of that are finding places that we can make gentle really matters enormously. And that where we can, I think we must do this. We really must. We must. And this is the gift of the ordinary. So many of us have been thrown into the ordinary. We're washing the dishes and making the food and cleaning the house and washing the dishes and making the food. Things that people have done all the time. But many of us are closer in to it than we have been. And just like you said that Vesper has this beautiful way, because she's not yet somebody who's in narrative. She's not old enough to be in the story of what's going on. She's just responding to your presence and face and body and other people who are important to her around her in a very straightforward way, and that she reminds you of something other than, or other things that are real but that can really possess us. I was reminded whilst you were speaking about something very beautiful I read once in a book by Mark Nepo, which is the possibility that we might treat everything around us as if it were that kind of presence. So the sofa and the teacup and the blossoms that are growing outside and the sunlight on the wall and the dirty dishes that need cleaning and all of it, the walls themselves of our houses and the roofs and the ground of our houses, we could treat all of it like it was reflecting back to us an invitation to make gentle in the way that you described. And I'm saying that because I'm realizing how helpful that has been for me in those moments where I had a moment earlier in the week, Lizzie, just after we had the news of, like I said, the brother of someone who I care about very much having died, that I could feel my body go into fear response, shaking and trembling and all of these kind of things. And there's nothing wrong with the fear response apart from it's overwhelming and so narrowing. And the thing that I found really helped me was, I'm right here, right now I'm here. And I'm here on the sofa and I'm here with my feet on the floor. And it didn't make any of the other stuff go away. And that's the thing that you were saying that I so appreciated, is I don't think that our response to this rightly can be to keep on pushing away the grief and the fear and the paying attention. But that can't be the only thing. The here-ness of things and the isness of things and the presence of things and the beauty of things and the joy of things, when we can bring them present too, they really help. And one of the ways I think that they really help, I'm just thinking about, you were talking about surrender. When I heard you talking about surrender before, I was thinking about a way in which when we surrender, we give up trying to grasp for things that we can't have. And I was reading an extraordinary and fierce bit of writing by an epidemiologist who was pointing out what an act of care proper physical distancing is from one another, that when one person in a family says, oh, I'll just go and have a cup of tea with my neighbor, and somebody else in the family says, I'll just go and see my girlfriend, then you've immediately put your family in the midst of a chain that links one world over there with this world over there. And we think that what we're doing is we're just, oh, well, I'm just getting what I can't resist having right now. But in reality, what we're doing is playing our part potentially in the giant chain of transmission. And in order not to do that, this act of being with the here-ness of things and letting go of but I have to have, I can't live without going to the shops to get that thing that I don't really need, or I can't live without a cup of tea with my neighbor. So I'm wanting to, I realize that what I'm doing in this conversation is finding in your words, in your poem, and in what you were saying, a real call to that this isn't just so that we will feel better, though we might feel better. And it's not such a bad thing to feel better, and to have times when we feel that way, because it also helps us to do what's really called for here, without our reactivity having us do things that look very, very mundane, but are really dangerous to the people around us.
Yeah, it's like finding a willingness to be within the constraint and letting the constraint, maybe this is like too radical a way of thinking about it, but like letting the constraint be the liberator instead of letting the constraint be the thing that makes us feel trapped. But that's the cool thing about being a person, is that that's possible. Like, it really is possible that we can find our relationship to the constraint rather than think the constraint is just one thing, which is a constraint. Well, yes, it's a constraint, and it might liberate us into seeing more things. It might liberate us into more gratitude. It might liberate us into doing the right thing. It might liberate us into God knows what. But that we could open our minds into letting the constraint be an invitation to something other than the thing we typically associate with a constraint. And that's what I feel really grateful for, is that I can see that, and I'm working with it, and every day working with it. And so in a way it's an enabling constraint, because it's forcing me to practice something which I wouldn't ordinarily get to practice because the constraints are never this tight. Yeah. I'm looking at our time, Justin, and realizing it's probably time for us to say goodbye. And I just want to say thank you, and that I'm really grateful for this. And I feel, as always, sane when I'm here, grateful to see you, grateful that I know people are here with us as well, and I feel their support of this and us and these injections of things to say and talk about and reflect on that we put into Turning Towards Life as well.
Thank you, Lizzie. I have no idea about the time because of our kerfuffles getting started. Who knows how long we've spent?
Yeah.
But I will agree with you. The thing I want to do, I want to say thank you to you, because it's the same is true for me. I said this to you when we met earlier, what a relief it is to be together.
Yeah.
And I extend that to all of you who are with us, that we are, in the midst of these constraints, finding ways to be connected really matters, I think. And so I just want to say also, if you've listened, if you are still here with us at the end of this conversation, just to say, we've launched with our dear friends and partners at Thirdspace another Turning Towards offering that we're calling Turning Towards One Another, which is a chance to gather together and speak with one another about how we are. It's a sort of weekly making community and checking in together practice that we're doing online. That's happening on a Wednesday evening UK time every week, and you can find it if you go to the Thirdspace website at wearethirdSpace.org. Click on Wisdom Offerings at the top right, and under there is Turning Towards Life and Turning Towards One Another, and you can find all of the details, and maybe we'll get to meet some of you there. But otherwise we'll stop here, and we'll be back, all being well, next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.